Hello and welcome back to episode 2 of The Vibe. My attempt at long-form conversations like Lex Freeman or Stephen Bartlett. I'm nowhere near as cool as those guys and definitely not anywhere near as popular, but some of my guests are definitely on par with some of theirs. And that includes my guest tonight, Preston Zeller, who's joining us from Colorado. He's a founder of PsalmLog and Zellerhaus. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Preston, and we'll dive in.
Yeah, sure. I'm in Phoenix, by the way, but we're close enough.
My bad.
So it's all good. It's all good. We're in that funky part of the States where it's like, barely any of the population lives in. So I've been building tech for like 15 years. Really beyond that, I got involved in like late 90s building stuff, but I'm also an artist. And so music has been my primary passion over the years, but abstract painter as well, filmmaker, done all sorts of things. And those have it's a very strange mix of like technical ability and then also like the artistic side. That's just, I really attribute one way or another. I have parents that are polar opposites in that way. And so I got a really good mix of them. Of those two ways of thinking. And so I've just continued to kind of try to make sense of where those land over time, where they mix in. And for sure, my faith as a Christian is really important. And so, and I've been married with 3 kids for like 14 years. Well, married for 14, not with the 3 kids. But yeah, so I love learning about all sorts of topics and also understanding like different points of view, realizing I don't want to just dig into, what I agree with. I try to understand other people's points of view too. So yeah.
I love that. I got to text my daughter because she's getting in the shower and we're going to hear a bunch of rap in the background if I don't.
All good.
So, admission. I lived in Phoenix. If I do something, I try to do it big, right? So the only time that I've ever spent any time in trouble, I'm an alcoholic in recovery, right? So I have evaded the law quite a bit, but I did spend 1 week on work release in Joe Arpaio's famous Tent City.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you did. You got to see that up close and personal.
Yes. I mean, if you're going to do it big, right?
Yeah. Well, they don't even do those anymore, I don't think.
They probably don't. It probably wasn't popular for a little while. The Arpaios were making a ton of money off the vending machines and stuff. I know there were some questions around that.
The prison system in general is like a very wacky industry in the U.S.
Yes, I would agree with that. Yeah. But it did verify something that I've always found to be true, which is if you're polite to law enforcement people, they don't give you a hard time. I had no problems whatsoever during that week because I said, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Please, thank you, and didn't walk in with a chip on my shoulder acting like they owed me anything, and they treated me like a human being. That's, I don't know, that's kind of a lost art sometimes, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me. I've gone down the whole route of like researching Freeman and the land and all that jazz, and are you familiar with that idea?
No, to explain.
Yeah, Freeman and the land is like essentially this idea that like who you are as a person and who you take credit for are 2 different things, right? So there's like a legal straw man, right, that's created when you get a social security number, all that kind of stuff. You can go into what a birth certificate really means. So there's people anyways, if someone's listening wants to go down that rabbit hole, feel free to, but there's people who basically wake up to that we're kind of, it's matrixy, and they go, well, I'm not going to opt into the system anymore. And so with law enforcement, that's what made me think of it. With law enforcement, they'll kind of claim that over, so say like a driver's license, right? Well, a license is you requesting permission to drive, but in a sense, people will go, well, why do I need permission to drive? I'm just a guy here, a gal here. I'm just going to drive. So, and I get the sentiment of it. You could go any topic with that, legal system, taxes, blah, blah, blah. But the point being like, well, you create a lot of hardship for yourself in many ways by going like, I'm going to try to live outside of all the laws. It's just like, that is a concept that is so far over anyone in law enforcement's head for the most part, I think. So it's like, why do that? First strange topic of the night.
No, and I'm going to double down on it, right? So I've been in recovery since 2006. When I first came in, like, smoking was just going out, so there weren't really ashtrays in the rooms of 12-step community, but there was still this sentiment of, like, you had a home group, you showed up, you set up chairs, you washed ashtrays, you helped people have coffee. Like, you learned how to serve before you expected anything back. And you kept your mouth shut until you knew what you were talking about, right? And flip that around now, and I think it's societally the same way, and it has to do with over-empowering the government and expecting too much from them. When you took charity away from the churches, now it's all a hand out and nothing but entitled expectations of, what are you going to give me? And I see that, and I still work in addictions recovery, and I see people, who are like, they're just so demanding. They stub their toe, and they think that their case manager or their peer should drop everything and fix their problem. They're not willing to do anything for themselves, and I think it's a double-edged sword. Like, not only is becoming overly regulated by the government, but some of that comes from over-dependence of the government and expecting them to take care of us too much.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, there's the whole, man, you go down the route too of like insane asylums, which they had their own issues for sure. But that whole notion of someone like really needing, kind of like a mental, you're in like way off the res. That doesn't really exist. It's just like, kind of adapt to whatever it is. But I spent a little bit of time volunteering at the Portland Rescue Mission long time ago. And I had a family member who worked there. Spent time talking with people there. I mean, I would actually go play music for the people who were homeless there. And it was such a trip.
That's cool.
Talking to them and talking to my cousin in general who, any recovery program for the most part, like that, where it's like you're on the streets and you're going to get recovery, right? Yeah. Which most people on the streets are using to some degree. Like, you have to be clean. You can't steal from people. You can't, being clean is the biggest one for sure. But like, minding your P's and Q's, and it's just pretty. I remember at the time he was just like, it's very common. People were like, nah, after a day or two, it's like, I'd rather go back to what I was doing,
Very much so. And you have a hell of a point. My wife works she runs a group home for people with serious mental illnesses. And we both are always saying, why did we have to throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to mental institutions? Like, there are definitely people who need to be institutionalized. Do they need to be, one flew over the cuckoo's nest, like zapped every day and treated like, no, but that doesn't mean that you can't provide a place for them. Just because we were once doing lobotomies and horrible things like that doesn't mean that we can't recreate a safe space for them to be, that's better for them and for society.
Yeah, well, I have multiple family members who've, their last days were in Alzheimer's. It's like, it's a different kind of like mental illness, but it's kind of one nonetheless where you aren't really capable of living in society in a normal way. Like, especially when you don't have memory, that's, it gets pretty dangerous actually to yourself and other people. But if you were just like, they'll figure it out. It's like your house is going to burn down like within the week, it's pretty unsafe. Anyways.
Okay, there's a good caveat. So how long do you think it's going to be before we have robots working with the elderly and people? I hear that. I feel like it's kind of I don't know, that's a few years from now, but that's definitely one of the things that the robotics companies would like you to envision as a use for their robots.
Well, yeah, I forget if we kind of touched on this in our pre-interview or not, but like the movie I, Robot, Will Smith, I think, goes into his like mom's house and she's making him pie or something. and he just looks at this robot, and it was the generation that I think was still like good in essence, but he's so skeptical of it. And I don't, okay, so my take on that would be I don't ever see it like the upper echelon of wealth ever doing that. It's sort of like Steve Jobs being like, I'll never give my kids an iPad. It like they would never, I don't think, get robotic help, because it's just that's my take on it. I think the robot thing would be more for like everyone else, you know. But it's that become a surveillance tool ultimately.
Yeah, I could see that. The surveillance state thing concerns probably. Let's touch on things that concern us as that, and then we'll back up. We're getting big, and then we'll fine tune it. But the things that concern me at where we're at right now are kids and people having relationships with large language models and AI. I think it's so weird. But then, like, it's how you define weird, because once it's fully embodied and it looks just like a human, it's less weird to me. Not that it's not weird, but it's less weird than having a her type romantic relationship with your telephone and the LLM that lives in there. So I can guarantee you that there's a huge spectrum of how people are going to define that, and a lot of them are going to be unhealthy. We can start with that one. The other one is surveillance. And the third one is, the only sci-fi thing that is starting to concern me, especially with the recent advances in Claude Code, is recursive self-learning seems to be a lot closer than I thought it would be. And I do think that there comes a point in time where it's kind of the tail trying to wag the dog to control a system that's developing itself.
And can you clarify what you mean by recursive self-learning?
Well, sure. So Altman loves to talk about AI scientists, where AI is actually making scientific discovery. And then if you listen to him talk a little bit more, what he's talking about is AI writing the code to create new large language model or new AI. So once AI starts creating AI, right? I think maybe it was you or somebody else I talked to. There was back in the 90s, they had a couple of these computers like talking to each other, and eventually they made up a language that the humans couldn't understand and just started using that language. Like,
well, that happened recently too. Yeah, but that was there's probably multiple examples of that. I know there's one where it was actually a separate kind of programming language that wasn't entirely made up. It was just like, it was gibberish to us, but like it was like, in essence, that's how computer components speak to each other, or software does. But I think I have heard of what you're talking about, where it's gone off the rails. I mean, surely what we get, and there's this whole idea of like technology disclosure too, which is another theme in there, that the technology that really exists is whatever, probably 20 years past whatever we have. I'm just throwing out a number, but 20 years is probably safe. You could go look, actually, a good example of that is our jets. So if people know, like the F-22, I'm pretty sure that was started developing in like the late 80s.
Yeah.
It takes a long time to develop a fighter jet. And that when that jet came out, it still is an insanely capable jet. It was just too sophisticated. But yeah, so
and then you've got companies like Anduril making, like, are you familiar with Anduril?
Anduril?
UL, I think Palmer Luckey, he's a Department of Defense contractor. Look him up when we're done. He's the Tony Stark of the real world, but he wears Bahama shirts and flip-flops everywhere he goes. He's got a mullet. He's 32. He's destroying it in the drone space and like all kinds of really cool DoD technology. Multi-billionaire, but he dresses like Jeff Spicoli. It's hilarious.
I guess at a certain point you can just, dress how you want, but that's. Yeah, I mean, Zuck kind of did that for a lot of the tech crowd, with the casualness, because he's like, I'm just gonna wear a hoodie everywhere I go, I think too, fan? But I hesitate to say I'm a fan of anyone in a way. I'm just like, I think people are, there's things you can objectively go, that's very impressive. And I'm not going to say, I'm not going to pretend to be like high and mighty about any of this stuff. It's like, if you've taken a company, whatever the circumstances may be, and you grow it that big, that's impressive. But as my question is always like, well, who are they as people? So money's money, but yeah.
He is impressive when it comes to Facebook. I think I love that he's not afraid to truly fail. Like you look at the metaverse or whatever, and then just keep moving forward and take a next step. But then again, like Elon can be a complete jackass sometimes in the way that he talks, especially when he follows Trump around. And I'm a Republican, so I'm not trying to say that I completely dislike either one of them. But they do act like 14-year-old kids with their mouths sometimes. But he always sticks to what he believes, no matter who's in office. Elon is Elon. And Zuckerberg, when he flip-flopped from like Uber left to Uber right, from the guy who had algorithms that prevented people on the right from getting their content put out on his social media platform, to kissing Trump's butt, I lost all respect.
Yeah, there's some amount of that in hindsight where so you remember, I think it was probably about a year ago now, where all the kind of technology elite, if you will, went to the White House for, I think it was the inauguration, right? And then there's, you want to get into conspiracy realm, you go, the whole ballroom thing, which, got everyone upset for about, a day. There was like the budget for that. You're like, all right, what are they building under it? And you start to think like, is it a data center? Is it, what is it? Like there's something, I wonder if that was part of the flip from Zuck, because he saw AI coming, and also that there was going to be obviously a radical change in view from the White House. But you're right. It's like, it's sort of bandwagoning, I guess.
Either be apolitical or stay with your politics. That's what I'm saying. Or come out and say, like, I listen to All In Podcasts a lot, right? And I will give major props to Jason Calacanis, the one Democrat who's surrounded by 3 Republicans, and he's actually started to change some of his views on the Trump White House. Some things he's still real, but he will tell you what it is that has changed his mind, and then he will tell you what the things are that he still stays really strong on. Like, I can totally respect that. I'll tell you, I voted for Obama. The only Democrat I ever voted for was Obama. I felt like this country needed an African-American president who wasn't going to have a strictly African-American agenda, and I will never regret that vote, because I think it was. I hate what he did with healthcare, but I was thrilled with the fact that we actually had an African-American who talked to everyone like they were just people, like we all should, and what represented that in the White House. And his wife has been kind of a stellar representation of what it means to be a pretty good human being too. So if a Republican ever came to me and said, you voted for Obama, what the hell, I thought you call yourself a Republican, I would tell you, yes, I did, and here's why. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, because I feel like the whole like who you voted for and that kind of stuff, it used to be just more of a segue to a dialogue, I feel like. Yes. And then at some point it just became, the whole identity politics thing, and you look at someone in one way or the other, and everyone's talking past each other. And there's been a lot more polarization of things for sure. But yeah, like if you, Jason, I worked at a company, big software company. It was very, left. That's what it felt like anyways, the culture there in 2016, right? So Hillary and Trump. And, people were just so fired up about that. Yeah. And it was almost like a gotcha. I feel like, that was kind of part of the beginning of it really getting intense with, first time Trump was running, of like, well, who are you voting for? And I didn't even want to get into it. And it's not something as passionate I was about, but I would just go, well, what do you think about Jesus? and people would get so uncomfortable right away.
That's awesome. I love that.
Okay, like that's an easier thing for me to talk about because I don't delve into the policy as much with a lot of this stuff because half the time I feel like whatever people campaign on, it ends up going some other way anyways for a variety of reasons. And so it's like, anyways, that's how I approach it then because I didn't feel like it was worthwhile to go, I don't know, like reveal that with people that I worked with in a way where it just didn't matter to me as much as like, hey, let's talk about like, a spiritual thing. Anyways, not that I'm opposed to talking about it. It was just when you can tell people are so amped up.
Yeah.
And they're looking for someone to hate. That's wild to me.
I would agree. I am hopeful that actually the data center thing kind of causes a divide and all that because it is that conversation is you're seeing bipartisan differentiation around who thinks we should continue with this AI infrastructure build and who thinks it's a really bad idea. There are Democrats that feel one way or the other. There are Republicans that feel one way or the other. So it would be really interesting if we could just go back to, like you said, I have always used where claiming that I'm part of a party, and I'll even micro define it when I get with people who are talking politics. I'll be like, look, I'm not a MAGA Republican. I'm more of a Tea Party Republican or a constitutional Republican. Okay, now we just set a framework so that you know where I'm coming from. That doesn't close that opens up a conversation so that now we predispose kind of what perspective we're coming from. But just like I don't know when it really started to happen, this hyper polarization, probably Trump Clinton. Pre that, like it used to be that we all kind of wanted the same thing. We just saw different ways of getting there. And now it's like, well, if you want something and you're on a party that opposes mine, I don't want it by proxy because that party wants it. Not because it doesn't make sense, just because I have to go against that party. And that's a sad place to be.
Well, if you really, I think, were to chart the polarization, you could run it alongside with the proliferation of social media and the sophistication of it. And I mean, let's not forget the Cambridge Analytica thing with Facebook. And for those who don't know that, you could look it up. But it's basically, Facebook knowingly manipulated different, countries and people like through showing them intentionally just repetitive, depressive things or divisive things or positive things. And it's like, we know that now that social media is 100% like the most successful content is the most controversial.
Yeah.
And it's a wild thing to think about that. Like that's the fuel of what's the word I'm looking for?
The dopamine hit algorithm.
It's the fuel of virality.
Yeah.
There you go. Sorry, it's late. It's later, so I'm like, what? But yeah, the level of divisiveness of a post is the fuel of virality, and not that like you go totally off the rails, but that's what gets the most thing. Because I mean, look at the guy that just went to Minnesota and found out all the Leering Center and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that was so divisive in a way because you have people that want to defend and give them the benefit of the doubt no matter what, not wanting to call a spade, and then everyone else going, yeah, that looks like pretty clear fraud.
Yeah.
You're like, and so it doesn't really matter what it is. It's like there's going to be some side that goes, yeah, I see that, but just I'm going to defend it for whatever reason. And a lot of it, I think, is just emotional at the end of the day. People.
Yeah, so that made me think about, that really makes me think about something I've really been contemplating. So I really got into, when large language models, like about a year ago, I started realizing, okay, there's a lot of sycophantic reward functions. Like these things are kind of telling you what you want to hear, which that must be in like their pre-training and their post-training, and it's to keep people engaged. Okay, so two things on that. One, that's horrible for business, and they're going to have to create models that don't do that. I already have to say, like, one of the hacks a friend told me is, when I want to pitch an idea to it, tell it it's a subordinate's idea and I want its help assessing it, rather than telling it it's my idea. Because if I tell it it's my idea, it's going to tell me it's brilliant every time. Whereas if I say, hey, a guy that works for me had this idea, help me pick it apart or digest it, it'll be a little more honest. But the funny thing that I think is, right, so hypothetically or theoretically, that sycophantic reward, that telling you what you want to hear, is what they're using to keep you engaged for a longer time. That's the opposite of what social media seems to do, which is the more I can piss you off, the more I can keep you engaged. And the disconnect there is interesting to me.
Well, I think the contrast there, Jason, is social media is a lot more of you interacting with other people's content versus if you're in just like an isolated chat, it's your own brain, right? So, you know, I mean, how often are most people being self-reflective enough to go, I have this thought, but it's not a good one. Or I have this idea, but it really sucks and I should scrap it. You know, there's a lot of reinforcement bias going on. And so I think that's the main difference versus not only is my feed going to be mostly things I agree with and make me feel good about whatever worldview I have. But then when the stuff comes up that it knows is different than what than I might be likely to agree with, it's gonna rile me up.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you play into that stuff?
And I guess in what way? What do you mean?
I mean, do you? I have always irritated my friends because I have used social media as a marketing tool since I kind of shifted into marketing in about 2000. I don't know, would have been around 2017, right? And I've never been much of a consumer of social media, but I post on about 10 different platforms 2 to 3 times a day. So I have quite a bit of presence on social media, and it's very rare that I see something that I actually comment. The last thing I commented on was somebody talking about Grok doing the bikinifying people thing that just happened, where you could tell, right? And he was calling Elon Musk a pornographer, and I was like, why do you have to be such you actually amplify this whole thing. And because why do you have to be so over the top? Like, pornography is intercourse. It's not putting someone in a bikini. Now, if and I know it did, it put some kids in a bikini, then you're exploiting children, which is illegal. Right. So why don't you just say you're being disrespectful to women and exploiting children and point it out that way, rather than trying to frame it as Elon Musk is now a pornographer? Like, every once in a while, something like that will pull me in. I commented, he commented back, and I stopped commenting. But I'm not. I very rarely get into like a back and forth on social media.
Okay, yeah. So to that point, no. The place where I will engage on is LinkedIn. It's usually like helpful stuff, and actually, LinkedIn comments tend to do better than posts oftentimes. And I just don't care to post enough. I'm doing other things. But I'm not really like that in general. Like the whole go leave a review thing. Like I only leave a review for a business in Google if it's a small business and they really need the review and they ask for it. But I'm not about to go and be like, this place sucks, and tear it down. Right. I don't have time for that in a way. I'd just rather go, I'm mentally not going to go to that place again. And if anyone asks me, I'll tell them. But I don't really need to leave this scathing review. And it's just never appealed to me. I also don't like leaving those kind of breadcrumbs all over the internet. Yeah, I would agree. Right? I mean, that's really your digital portfolio. It is. Yeah, it is. And so I don't get much value out of it too. Like I have for business use cases, I have an anonymous Reddit profile that I'll go and just, seed, whether it's just replying to things or trying to get ideas or whatever the case may be. But like hanging out on Reddit too long, you're going to feel like you're going to go cuckoo because people are interesting there too, especially because it's anonymous, like fully anonymous. It's like X.
Full disclosure, I've never been on Reddit, and it has gained so much popularity in the age of AI.
Yeah. I hadn't either really until, it was kind of sporadic, but I hadn't really spent much time there. It just seemed like this strange place under the bleachers at a high school, and then, or a place where, video gamers hung out. And then I'm like, okay, well, there's actually enough of these. If you're doing product research, it's an amazing spot to go. Like one of the things I built with AI last year was monitoring X, YouTube, Reddit. Those are the main ones for whatever keywords you wanted. And you could dictate certain subreddits and change the keywords on that. And then it was putting those into a dashboard and then bringing them into a Slack channel. And so probably about 4 or 5 times a day, we'd get a notification that like, hey, these new posts mention your keyword. And because that's one of the hardest things is like going and being proactive where your people are topically talking about, something you're selling or your product. Like, how do you insert yourself into those conversations? Or they're talking about your brand in these places, and you're just not getting notified. Google alerts isn't enough. You could pay for some crazy expensive brand monitoring platform like Meltwater or something like that. But I built this thing for like $40 and it was great.
That is awesome. So, what a great use case.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff like that where that's where social becomes a lot more useful to me. And like kind of, to some degree, I feel like the people who are hanging out all the time on social, it's like, okay, well, you have some very influential platform, and I'm not talking about just posting. I mean, people who are just like constantly looking at content. But like you have probably a really big platform, or you're selling something, or you're selling a dream. I mean, AI has actually, Jason, it's brought people out of the woodworks. Like I've made N8N sequences that people have just ripped and put out there as their own. Hey, comment, sequence, and I'll send you this sequence. And I just reply and go, oh, you mean this one? And I made it. I'm like, you guys, like, it's pretty low. I feel like to just start ripping content and go, look at this new thing I, discovered. And
yeah, but that's kind of a top-down thing now, isn't it? We're kind of like China. Like, we always bitched about how China replicates everything that we do, but even if you look at these models being trained off of a whole ton of information that some of which was proprietary. I mean, the argument that fair use comes from anything that's on the internet is fair use to train on. I agree with that, but there's some pretty good indicators that they got behind paywalls and trained off stuff they shouldn't have trained off of as well, right? So one of my favorite memes is it's a boy with a fishing pole fishing, and it says Chat GPT across his shirt, and then he has a little bucket where he keeps his fish, and DeepSeek is fishing out of his bucket. And I'm like, yes, that is so true.
That is a crazy thing. Are you familiar with oh my gosh, I can't think of his name right now. But anyways, he's a musician. Rick. Anyways, the name will come to me. But he's a silver fox-haired musician. And so he's been talking about Suno, which I've used Suno quite a bit to do covers of songs that I've written, and it puts polish to them. So that's been an interesting use case. But Rick Beato, new company. Okay. But I think this was about a month ago, he brought up that it was Universal made this massive deal with Suno for you to be able to make personas of well-known artists. Because, a lot of times the labels will own the master recordings.
Yep.
I mean, they own so much, especially if you sign away. It's, yeah, I'll sign whatever to, make it big. And so that's going to be really interesting to see what kind of, copycat work continues to come up out of that. But the fact that Universal's already said, hey, we got the stable of artists, and we're just going to let people make whatever song they want in that person's voice or style.
That's crazy. I hung out with the guys from 11 Labs at a conference, and so they have a little bit better model. Like, they're really reimbursing people for using their voices. I know they bought Darth Vader's voice from that estate, and it's now in what's that? Roblox licensed it through 11 Labs in there. But they have, like, if you have a good voice, like a voice for radio, you can put your voice in there, and then businesses can pay inference costs to use your voice. And they actually have a kid that's a software engineer that everyone was like, you have such a good voice, you have to put it on there. And he totally didn't want to, probably very like nerdy, I don't, that's not my gig type of kid, but they convinced him of it. And he's pulling $25,000 to $30,000 a month off usage of his voice.
Yeah, so it's like so I'm a part of ASCAP, which is performance rights organization.
Okay.
So that like I have music licensed out in the ether, right? That's any TV show you watch, any movie, whatever, it's like that stuff gets played. I actually saw a very interesting line item from it was on like an international line item for royalties, and it was for like live performance.
Nice.
Like, what is this? But anyways, my point some like really old song I have. But my point being, that's cool they're doing that for voice, because I think that's been one of the things is like, okay, well, how there's so many forms of like original creativity, and then like enhanced original creativity, and then just stuff that's totally fabricated. And how does all this stuff get tracked? 11 Labs, by the way, is like an awesome product. I'm hoping to incorporate it into PsalmLog at some point. But yeah, that's.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's phenomenal, and I don't have a whole lot of time to play with tools like that, but anytime I've been in there, I've been impressed. I was impressed when I met him. I do think the music industry seems to be really good at figuring out how to divvy up compensation before anybody else does. I'm not a musician enough to know whether they do it fairly, but even if going back to like when we first had the iPod and all the different what was the black marketplace where you could just like run
Napster?
Yeah, like back to the Napster days.
Kazam.
Yep.
LimeWire.
Yeah.
If anyone's listening to this and they're like, "What is he talking about?" You're like, "Well, that's what Spotify was before it was Spotify, except you could get all the files." Go look up the Metallica lawsuit,
Yes, yeah, but so that industry does seem to kind of lead the way in figuring those things out. I do feel like everyone should get compensated. I mean, I understand inference is expensive, and these companies have to make money, but they've got if you're taking somebody else created, you should compensate them, and so I do hope they figure all that out.
I've been using like stock libraries for a super long time, and even like my film I made, The Art of Grieving, that's just one example, but man, there's 25 30 cue tracks in that, and I listened to easily 10 times that, just to get to the right songs, probably more but it was and that was through Soundstripe is so affordable, and you'd have these like amazing artists on there. Because I remember going to license music for different shows in times past, and or different projects, and it was just it was very cost prohibitive if you wanted like a really good song. And that there was this kind of interesting time period in the mid like 2010s where music libraries started to become a bit more common, right? But the quality of the songs were just like, there was something lacking in them. And then they got used so much that you could almost tell like, that's a corporate jingle. That's a corporate jingle from this, whatever side over here. And then it just became this, call out for mediocre content. But then all these artists started figuring out, I can upload my music, and it's interesting because like societally, I was just in Italy for a while, and you go and you look at all these like insane paintings and the appreciation they had for a lot of the sculpting and just the buildings and all that kind of stuff. And just on like a broader level, you go, we don't appreciate that very much nowadays. I don't think in the US for sure. Just the creative ability, the raw creative ability and the learned creative ability, and how much that takes,
Do you feel like AI is going to take away from that or democratize that, or it's going to be some of both? Let me frame this with first how I feel, right? So if you were to go, like, let's go back to let's go back to a battle that Napoleon was in, okay? If you had somebody on the side of the battlefield with oil paints painting the scene as it happened, and a guy walked up with that hoodie camera and wanted to take a picture of it, the one painting would say that he was like totally ripping off the art of capturing a picture. And then you get somebody else who walks up with a long lens, and then the next guy has an iPhone, and then the next guy has a nano banana image generator. Like, I still think there's a market for every single output of that each of those artists did, even hundreds of years later. So it's not a either or; it's a new and then. That's kind of how I see it. But you're much more of an artist, so I'd love to hear your side of that.
Well, you can still for sure, I think, make a living off art today. I mean, part of the problem is, I think it's harder to. You have to really get good at sales, or you have to have someone to like invest in you who goes, I'm gonna turn you into like this persona that's a product, which is basically what a lot of the music industry is. And I mean, a lot in general is just based around how big is the social media following. And so, but I agree. I think these things shift over time, radio changed things, TV changed things, online changed things. And so every time that happens, there's either fear or there's, hey, how are we going to work with this? I was talking to someone the other day about this, that like with regards to Christianity, it was like, okay, what if the church at the time said during the Gutenberg press, no, the Bible's going to get corrupted, and we have to make sure that we maintain the scrolls or the manuscripts ourselves and really just keep it to the way it's been for 1,000+ years. Like, what if that happened? And so there's a lot of
catastrophic for the church.
Yeah, for sure. And so there's moments like that in history that goes, we freak out. And maybe in 5 years I'll be wrong and we'll all be, getting served tea by robots having nothing to do, but I doubt that's the case. I think it just evolves. And so in many ways, I think it's going to expose like, well, there will be a clear distinction between who's like a typical artist in the sense that and I'm using that term loosely, artist that uses tools, just purely digital tools, versus who has performative artistic skills. That I think will get even more valuable in the future, which is ironic because if you go back before all the, kind of modern communications that we have and radio and whatnot, it's like, you had to go see someone. I think what's the word I'm thinking of? A stereophone? Is that the right word? First form of like a vinyl record player where you had the speaker.
Like the viola with the big thing?
Yeah.
Yes. I only know that because it was in an Anne Rice book and they kept referring to it, so it stuck with me.
But that was like the first I think the first like speaker type thing that you could like play a recording off of. Anyways, my point being, before all that, you had to go see someone play or perform or you had to go see the painting in person, whatever it was. So, and maybe all of this is just like an odd boomerang back to that, where you'll just have this distinct classification of there's lots of artists again, and like maybe the term artist is going to get redefined, but then the people who you can meet in person and interact with, and they have like that art form continues on in person. It's like a more respected category.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, first off, if you look at Andy Warhol, I mean, he started mass producing paintings, right? So it's not like mass producing art is a new thing. And Warhol is revered as one of the best artists of all time, or most revered, at least by people outside the art community. I know his name for sure.
Well, he was a pop culture icon too, which changed that.
Well, and so if what you're saying is in order to make money off of your art, you may have to develop some new skills, whether that's marketing yourself or looking at things differently. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think the thing that concerns me when it comes to reimbursement or democratization or whatever, like when I first started hearing that actors were going on strike because of AI, I don't know if you've seen that AI generated female, the girl that was an actress. I can't remember her name, but she's cute, like 20-year-old girl, looked super real. Signed a Hollywood contract. Newsom immediately said you can't do that in California, and so, but my thing was like, I don't feel bad for Robert De Niro. I don't feel bad for any of these multimillionaires that their world is getting rocked, that think that they have a political voice that extends far beyond what it should or anything. But I do feel sorry for the gaffer, and I feel sorry for the lighting guy, and I feel sorry for those people. And when I say, okay, well, maybe that's going to get offset by the fact that two kids who are really good at using AI on a $5,000 budget in the next 5 years could create a blockbuster film. So it's going to democratize it all on those lines. Middle class, lower class people are going to be able to enter that industry. But then when I see Disney making deals with ChatGPT and Universal making deals with Suno, I'm like, no, we're just moving more towards like the big corporations are the only ones making any money off of anything.
Yeah. Yeah. For me personally, that part of my background is, I went to film school then, but more importantly, I actually worked on films and made films and did the gamut of roles inside films. And it is laborious. Like most people don't know that on a major film, you have thousands and thousands of people that are being employed just for that one film. So to your point, like those are the set people, the electricians, the unions that like move the equipment, the hair and makeup, all the, special effects people, the editors, yada, yada. Yeah. Even when I was really in that industry around like 2010 and then, 2005 to 2010. And you could see around like the 2008 time period, I worked in like the agency system, and people then were starting to like really go, there's a moment happening here because the economy was so janky and uncertain of, hey, who can make the best content like with the least amount of resources. But I hope what continues to like be at the core of everything is the story good, because that is the thing that I think if people really sit there and think about what makes any film worth watching, is the story good? Are the characters believable? That's of course there's shades in there, but if it's just like a garbage story that's dressed in special effects, or it's really trying hard to deliver a message that doesn't at all fit in with what that film is, which we saw a lot of with the whole quote unquote woke stuff. I mean, just it just became less about someone escaping to experience a different world and more about this like kind of propaganda, for lack of a better word. Which is
how many boxes can you
unfortunate.
check? Let's see. Did we have this scene? Do we have this relationship? Do we have this demographic? Yeah, that got real annoying, especially on Netflix. I know exactly what you're talking about.
So I'll give you an interesting example, Jason. So I took one of my classes in college. It's one of my favorite classes. It was an upper division screenwriting class, but it was about the 12 sequence structure of feature films. And like, if you go look, a lot of people are familiar with like the 3-act structure. But if you go look up the 12 sequence structure, it's basically 4 in the first act, 8 in the second act, 4 in the third act. And what they are is a series of beats, right? I'm going to call them beats, but like it's the story has to hit a specific marker every about 15 minutes. So I may be botching that. Maybe it's the eight sequence structure, but whatever the case is, it's every 15 minutes. So it's 8. But and so we watched movie after movie, and you were like, "Oh my gosh, films are very formulaic," and you could compress it down if you look at a season, right? A season of any show, you have the same thing going on as an arc over the season and then within episodes. So anyways, I say that to say our final exam was so interesting because I forget the name of the script or what it was, but it was basically, here's the scenario. And we got given this at the beginning of the final. It was, here's this script. And you were supposed to have read it beforehand. Here's the script. And it gave you a series of parameters that the fictitious studio came back with. The actor that's currently in it in this role, and it was like a major role in the film, dropped out. But then I think it was like Chevy Chase decided to come back into the film, which meant that you had to then, and he would only come into the film if you could increase his on-screen time. So it was, a page of screenwriting is about a minute on screen. So it was like 5 more minutes or something like that. But which meant that he also had to you had to decrease this other actor's time. And then you had to also work in this certain like character component that was being demanded by him. So all these things, right? And I remember going through that process. And then later seeing on the agency side how all those things are kind of negotiated, right? This is why when you see executive producer at the end of a film, some of those, like a number of those, are going to be representing the studio's best interests, and they're usually financing a film to some degree. So it, like, people don't realize how truly sort of just dropped in themes or actors or whatever the case may be, like having the guaranteed screen time, the thematic elements, all this kind of stuff. You could start out with a truly fantastic script, and by the time it gets through all the cooks, it turns into garbage. And sometimes you can watch a film and see that. You're like, this started out really good, and then it just lost it.
Yes.
Anywho.
There Will Be Blood. First date I had sober. It was the most painful movie of my life.
God, I actually watched that all the way through first time recently. That is a strange movie. Daniel Day-Lewis is that dude's a trip.
He is, and he's done some great stuff. But that movie, it's in there with another girl in her 30s when I was in my 30s in a theater, and it was our first date.
That was a date movie?
Yeah, my first date sober. After I got sober and finally had the guts to ask a girl out, we sat through that damn movie. It was, oh my God, I will never forget that. But you know what I hear you saying, and this is interesting because, it's fascinating to hear of that story problem that you were given in film school. But do you know who's really good at taking a basic model of how things best work and teasing in different ways to predict the next best scene?
It's probably, you're going to say, an LLM.
You're damn right.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the hardest things though, and I'm sure I haven't really looked at like I'm sure there's all these screenwriter rappers now, but and maybe it's gotten a lot better. But good dialogue, this is what Aaron Sorkin is really good for, really good with, still is. Good dialogue is just it's hard because when you're sitting there writing, it's you. That's why you're supposed to do like these long character briefs. Like if we're in a scene together, I know that Jason has XYZ background, and that's why he talks the way he does. And then I have my background. That's why I talk the way I do. Like you can tell when a character in a film just has like probably a garbage background, or the director didn't coax it out, or it's a bad actor. So I guess it could be a variety of things.
Mark Wahlberg, he's a Boston Southie in every movie he makes. If you cast him as a Boston Southie, he's awesome. You try to put him in something where he's not supposed to be a Boston Southie, good luck.
Yeah, he's gotten typecasted. Okay, so it's the 8 sequence structure. I botched that earlier. Not 12, 8. So every 15 minutes in a movie, something very particular happens. So, anyways, yeah, Mark Wahlberg. That's a fascinating one too, because who is it? I know Matthew McConaughey. That's why he did the one where he had AIDS. Yeah. And he's done some pretty extreme stuff because he was kind of heartthrob, and some people never break out of that, or they're just like, I'm done dealing with this crazy industry. But
are some people not capable of breaking out of it and some capable? I mean, Stallone is Stallone in every movie he's in, right? Schwarzenegger, I've seen play a lot of different roles. Just to take two of that level of act, like Kindergarten Cop, I don't think Stallone, and I definitely don't think Vin Diesel could pull off Kindergarten Cop, right? Okay. Vin Diesel tried, and he was terrible at it. Schwarzenegger was hilarious.
So it's interesting. I don't know about Schwarzenegger. He's done so many other endorsement things, but I think Vin Diesel. I've heard this. Maybe it's true, maybe not, but I've heard that he actually has somewhat of a significant ownership in Fast and Furious franchise, enough to probably not care what else he does. That, and then Stallone, which his stories circulated quite a bit, in that he was amount of rejection he went through, and things to be able to make Rocky and have credibility. Like he really stuck to his guns on, like, he didn't want to be owned in the traditional sense. So, okay, you want to know the crazy thing about AI and acting, right?
Yeah.
And to be fair, I don't know how often this is happening or not at this point, but I guess this is more like influencers, but it's influencers getting cast into movies who are not actors because they have a built-in marketing vehicle.
Mr. Beast, yeah.
Yeah, he's. But that's a curious one. There is, acting is not, I wouldn't call it like the most difficult thing ever, but it's also not exactly easy either, especially if you're going to do something really intense. Like, you have to be willing to lose every inhibition you have. There's people that do that really well in terms of taking on a role. But to just drop someone in because, they have 10 million followers, I don't know. Maybe it'll sell some stuff because they have a big enough following.
Again, I think it's I mean, we have the TikTok generation with this short attention span, right? So I'm not sure that, and it's interesting that most Netflix and HBO, like most of those series, are 8 episodes, which follows your 8 formula, right? Almost all of them are 8 episodes, and then some of them will have 10, some of them will have 7, but it's usually 8. So that kind of sticks with that. But I think that you've got this TikTok attention span, and those who are into short bursts of being super overly stimulated, like special effects and fake stuff, may resonate with him forever. But there's always going to be also a segment that the Heath Ledgers and the guys that can do, or the women that can do, like the true character acting, the Jack Nicholsons of the world, are always going to resonate. But I do think YouTube really changed the whole formula for what it means to have a face on a screen and be in front of a whole lot of other people. And then TikTok took it to another level.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Instagram, then, I mean, all of it's kind of, you're right, though. TikTok, I think, really ramped it up. So, it's funny enough you mentioned the special effects thing, because my last, one of my last papers I wrote in college was about basically the the similarities between special effects and pornography. And the whole thing was that it taps into a similar part of your brain.
Yeah, the dopamine hits.
Which at this point, this is probably what social media is. But it's like when you watch something that's special effects laden, it's like draining in a different way than watching something that's not. And it's like part of it is, it's not real, or it's not a real scenario. I mean, there's a number of things, but the special effects, in general, this is, I watched, what was it? The last Kong movie, Godzilla and Kong, or I don't know, whatever. It was basically,
there's monster. There's a series now, the monster one. I just finished it. It's got Godzilla.
That show's cool though.
Yes, it is.
It's
not bad.
One, right? It's talking about, right?
Yes, yeah, the Apple one.
Yeah, people were dunking on that or had bad reviews. And I'm like, why? Because it didn't have enough King Kong. It was more about the people. But I watched the one with my yeah.
I love that.
I watched the one with my son, and it's where they go into the center of the earth and it inverts, and it was 99% just Kong, and then Godzilla comes into play at some point, but then there's the other Kong who's kind of haggard, and they're fighting him. But anyways, it was all very clearly just a very sophisticated cartoon, and my son was blown away by it, and I'm like, I couldn't watch it after a while because I'm like, this is so it's so unreal. Yeah, anyways,
it's that dopamine addiction. The guy that actually created the thumbs up on Facebook he's created a whole series of things trying to reverse that curse. He totally regrets it because it was meant to be a positive emoji to make people feel better, and that was really the beginning, of my understanding. That was the beginning of the dopamine addiction to social media, and the fact that you get these incremental dopamine hits, and then it's almost like a drug addiction where you need more and more and more of it. And it'd be the same thing with these action films. I would say the same thing about Alien versus Predator. I'm where the hell's the story? The original Alien, Ridley Scott, badass movie, right? Second Alien, even better. The only sequel, Bill Paxton. That's it, man. Game over. I loved that, right? Talk about a versatile actor. Bill Paxton was awesome. Then you get into some of the later ones where it's just about trying to scare you every 5 minutes and a bunch of action, and there's very little storyline.
I didn't mind the Shane Black one. I think it was the first kind of reboot of that. I was like, it's okay. Where the guy's son is walking around with the mask, and they got to go find him. And
yeah, that wasn't bad.
But I totally get what you're saying. Well, that's and this is a whole nother thing too. But you ever seen? Okay, there's people make videos about it. But then you notice it too, where you'll go back, say to the first Transformers movie, and you're like, that is still pretty mind-blowing that they made it when they did.
Hell, the original Star Wars.
Yeah, right. And then you can watch a new movie and you're like, whoa, they phoned in the graphics, special effects. I mean, maybe it's just more expensive. I don't know what. Cheaper rendering models. Well, I don't know what it was, but you would think all that stuff just kind of gets a lot better. Granted, Industrial Light and Magic they are who they are for a reason. But
well, I mean, I think some of it is they get us used to what they do. I mean, the original the Titanic with DiCaprio, I could tell the computer animated graphics it annoyed me. But then they get you real used to that stuff because in Star Wars they were running like an empty pole up and down a telephone wire to make noises, right? But also Lucas went to film school and like totally studied all the archetypes from the Greek and Roman literature. Like he put a hell of a lot of thought into that, whereas all the rest of the series after the 4, 5, and 6 were kind of just tossed out there. But I want to going back to AI, to something you said that really stood out to me, which is writing is hard. And I do think large language models struggle with that. So I use a lot of content creation tools, right? And I have gotten to the point where I've gone through every bit of best practices. I've got 35-page brand guides in Markdown that I talked my way through that an LLM can refer to. I have 50 sheets of like posts that I personally wrote that I'm like, this is what it sounds like to be, and yet it still likes to go back to AI slop, M dashes. It's not about making a good movie. It's about capturing an audience. That sentence structure right there, like they do seem to struggle with authentic feeling writing.
Yeah. What model do you use the most?
Claude, hands down.
Yeah. Claude is the best at creative writing. I would agree. And then there's different things in there too. It's a good point. I mean, I think it depends on what it's for. If I think the social media piece of it that you're talking about right now, that seems to be one of the trickiest for people to get around. Because I even like I've tried to have it fill in the gaps on like a LinkedIn post, right? And I'm like, just did something to it that I don't know. It was too fluffy.
Yeah. You want to slap it. You're like, why?
Yeah, and granted, I didn't go through nearly the depth of you're talking about and really kind of training it to like here are the examples. But I'd rather for LinkedIn or for just like social posts, I'd rather just almost write it and just slap it up and call it a day. Silly as that sounds.
No, it doesn't, and it actually takes us back to that circle of history that you were talking about, which is one of the things that I have Whisperflow now, and I gladly pay my $15 a month to stick my finger on 2 keys and just talk, right? And so now I can bespoke a social media post, and I can give it to Claude, a Claude model that's trained on my voice, and say, clean this up a little bit, don't change it, just clean it up a little bit, and now I've got a perfect post. And I do think that we may get back to using our mouths more than we write or definitely type.
Yeah. Well, that's what's been interesting about like building PsalmLog is it's voice first. And I've had people go, can I type into it? I'm like, no, just use your voice. Cause we get out, our thoughts so much easier when we talk versus it's a lot easier to judge your words as you're writing them. I mean, they're staring at you. Surely I don't like to sound stupid, but if I do, then fine. I mean, I told everyone about the 12 sequence structure. That doesn't exist. It's
don't worry about it.
Structure. No. But we are human, right? And so maybe, all the, certainly there's things we want to be really polished, right?
You hallucinated.
If you go into an investor presentation, you're just like, all right, guys, I'm going to wing this and just talk total buffoonery. That's probably not a great idea or some big presentation you have. But if you know the content well enough, I think you could riff on it and clean up the ums and ahs, whatever in your natural speech that might be filler. But we should get back to that more. Yeah. That's actually why I like podcast clips, because you see it's a real person. You see, that the language isn't perfect. The mannerisms make sense. I mean, that's one thing. I've created AI UGC ads and all that kind of stuff. And I'm almost like hesitant to get too much into AI avatars. Just something about that feels...
There's an uncanny valley there still.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking for some, coding video the other day, and this guy who has a pretty big channel, and he's like, oh, hey, I'm so and so's AI avatar, and I'm gonna tell you, talk to you about this thing. I'm like, nope. I went back. Like, I don't want to watch the fake version of you. Tell me this.
Yeah, and it almost feels like what you do. You couldn't take the time to actually record something for me. You had to like have it, and I think that's gonna be. Tell me about PsalmLog though. I want to hear the origin story and the whole like how it works. That's obviously a big passion project of yours. So talk about that.
Yeah, thanks. It started as a journaling app. I mean, really, I was actually looking for. Well, let me tell you what it is, and then I'll kind of roll into how it came about. So it's a place to go get biblical advice 24/7, personalized biblical advice. Didn't start out as that though. It started out with this notion of just like, hey, a lot of people in the Christian world, they want to keep a journal, or it's a good practice. A lot of people in general want to do that, and they don't. We write less and less these days, and so I was like, okay, well, I know voice, it's easy to just sit there and rattle out your thoughts. And you could do it more than once a day if you really wanted to. So that I based around some really like basic principles. It's voice first. It allows you to get a structured feedback loop that combines your voice with the actual context of maybe what you were journaling about, like the verse. So you're reading scripture. I actually approached it more as like a study tool in some ways, and then be able to track that over time. And then kind of the meta theme here was, could you track like spiritual growth? Because that's like a really abstract concept to think about tracking. And I think just like personal spiritual growth, that can be kind of hard to, put a finger on. Certainly like with sobriety, you have a very distinct point to go, I haven't, done such and such thing since this date, drank, whatever it is.
Yeah, but it's like Overeaters Anonymous. That never made sense to me, because like, how do you completely abstain from, right?
Yeah.
So I understand what you're saying.
What's the overeating? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. How do you really measure whether or not you were on? So I guess you have to. Do you begin by setting goals or defining like what good enough looks like for you, or what? How does that work?
Yeah. That's a good question. I mean, well, so I started as as the journaling. I released it, and then I was tweaking the first iteration came out in August of last year. Then I was tweaking the onboarding and all these different things. But we put this interstitial in it where it's like when you go to start a new journal, it would ask, hey, what do you want to journal about? And based on what it asks you to journal, what you wanted to journal about, it would then pre-fill it with certain information. So it took away the blank canvas syndrome.
Okay.
And then I started realizing like people are using this in a different way than I thought. They actually want to understand better what the Bible says about their specific situation. So instead of, maybe you go Google a verse, that kind of thing. That verse may speak to your situation, but it's still just like, it's just not enough for what you want. And so I just kept iterating on that. And then the really odd thing about this is I've actually thought probably a lot more how people are going to misuse it than actually use it for its intended purpose. So that's where a ton of the testing and the guardrails and the, preventing hallucinations and addressing people, like I'm basically trying to mimic, somewhat of like a life coach, or it's not counseling, but someone with that kind of background, how they might approach you. Because especially I think in the Christian world, there's so many things where people have hangups or hurt legitimate, and it may not get addressed correctly. As someone has said once, hurt people, and we're broken, and we're not going to handle everything correctly. I think it's a misnomer that like anyone who becomes a Christian goes, I'm going to reach perfection. Like, no, you're not. Not in this life. So, you're not going to have the best responses. So I'm trying to create a way where, as you pointed out earlier, we're increasingly isolated. And if people want to go this direction of seeing, hey, how does the Bible speak to my situation? Creating a legitimate solution to that isn't just like ChatGPT off with no guardrails, which I've had a lot of conversation with people who've tried to use it and they're like, I don't know.
Claude's better for that too. Just
yeah,
I'm sorry, but you're right.
No,
like
right.
it definitely needs guardrails. Can I ask you? I don't want you to disclose your stack and all, but I mean, did you fine tune an open source model, or do you have like a primary foundation model that's powering the responses?
No, there's a foundation model powering it, but there's a lot of other logic that's proprietary going on in the background to make it what it is. So, but that's part of the long-term goal, is to actually create an entirely separate large language model just for this. So, I don't know how that kind of look, but
no, I think it kind of speaks to one of the predictions that I have, which is we're very sensationalist, and when AI first came out, this idea of artificial general intelligence or artificial superintelligence, kind of this one big computer to rule everything, was a neat sci-fi type of idea. But it was the sycophancy in business that made me realize, like, okay, what we're really going to need is like an orchestration of smaller models that are trained on clean data and specific data for a subject matter. And then can talk to one another almost the way that you set up in Mind Studio or N8N communication blocks, right? And you can call different models. At least in Mind Studio, I know I can. At this point, I may want like a very small model, like a Amazon Nova, that's A, inexpensive, and B, not very creative, so it's less prone to hallucinate. Whereas at this point, it's generating a response that I want to be creative, so I'm going to plug it into Opus 4.5 and spend the $5 every time it thinks its way through it, right? And so I think that's almost, that type of thing is probably going to exist, but they're not going to be just general models with different sizes of parameters. They're going to be models. So that data you're collecting is probably gold, because eventually you could train a smaller model on the data that you've collected, as well as any historic or current religious doctrine that you want to be in there, and you would get much less prone to hallucinate and probably much better outcomes when you do it.
Yeah, no, that's you've connected the dots well there. I mean, I think so. What I'm trying to do in the broader like Christian space is start it's called Alliance for Faithful AI, but it's basically amongst Christian practitioners of AI. What are we doing to use AI in an ethical way? What are we doing what are the techniques we're using? Like, I mean, and you could do this in any field, right? Like Whoop just did this in Boston, where they're trying to pull together their resources to say, hey, we're all working on stuff here. Yeah, there's different AI communities, but it's like the use case.
Yeah.
Right. Not just like, oh, we're all building stuff, and that's not a bad thing. I'm not trying to bash that, but it's like where you're making this like adaptive use case for AI that's so specific. Finding those people, I think, is going to become a much more advantageous thing to do probably this year, and go, okay, what are the use cases here? Like, I just came out of the real estate industry last year, and that I was trying to find people there. Like, how are we using real estate data in MCP servers and in workflows and all that kind of stuff? And versus, I guess, all of us just trying to like sell things. And like, hopefully there's a more altruistic use case with all these things. And so, yeah, if there could be if PsalmLog could contribute to help build an LLM that's really specific for the faith-based world, that would be a dream, because then it's less, it's I think built more from this authentic place than like Sam Altman doesn't align with like the Christian worldview. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying people always have to, but their direction of where they want to go is very different. And so even if it's held under a nonprofit, like, they were at some point, but yeah. So I think what I'm getting at in many ways is probably hopefully inspirational for whatever people are doing, because if you can be also in a position to rally people around, let's say, the automotive industry, you could build an LLM that is so amazing at everything automotive, from how you improve and work on and restore vintage cars to, I mean, that could be a niche in and of itself, to newer cars that have tons of fiber optics wrapped in it. Maybe you have one that's like electric. I mean, the person who can figure out those models in those spaces that are really hyper fine-tuned, I think there's a lot of interesting opportunity there.
Well, philosophy and religion have always been a huge thing for me, right? And I kind of gravitated toward Buddhism and Eastern religion when I was young, because I didn't grow up in a very religious household, and I got into martial arts early, and I've always struggled with theology, period. Like, I've tried to get over it, and I can't. I feel like people who believe in theology have an advantage. I think that's a great thing to. I just feel like it's a bedrock that's hard to replace, unless you're maybe smart enough to understand like astrophysics, and then you can fall back on like wormholes and multiple universes. But I'm not that smart, and yet I don't really have the faith. So I've always kind of been stuck in kind of this purgatory of. But I do love philosophy, and when you were talking, I was thinking, just think if you had the exact same thing for Buddhism, Taoism, Judaism, Islam, like all trained on the pure essence of those spiritual beliefs, and then let those models talk to each other and ask it questions about how we should solve world problems or deal with AI. I'm like, how magical would that be?
That sounds like the premise for a crazy movie.
It does, doesn't it?
My brain hadn't even gone there, but yeah, there's going to be, I think, a lot of different, and we're talking about such a very specific example, but the potential for where these things can go when people are putting their brain power behind it, like, who knows, and that's where the future is exciting in that standpoint. I don't live in fear of, like, there is a certain amount of AGI that is freaky, don't get me wrong, but until that gets to a point where it's really, we see the dystopia is happening, like, we got a job to do. I think if you work in these industries, like, do something beneficial for people.
I would agree. And, I try to listen to podcasts. Like, whenever I'm into a subject, I'll try to get every perspective. I listen to one that's like bashes LLMs nonstop. I listen to Hard Fork, which is as left as you could possibly get. One guy from Platformer, one guy from the New York Times. They love to bash Trump and Elon and everything. But I always want, like, the other perspective. And one of the interesting ones I heard was she was kind of talking about some of these, like, pseudo AI religions that are starting to pop up, and I wondered, like, I don't know how much clickbait is. Do you hear anything about people kind of like trying to create a new version of God through artificial intelligence, or any type of undercurrent of that religious sect, or is that just like, hey, this makes a neat story people are going to click on?
I don't doubt that is. I mean, I think you could argue in many ways that you could turn all sorts of things into religion. Like, I would argue atheists are highly religious. They're just, like to twist words to mean different things. But it's like God doesn't have to be the creator of everything and, like, the moral standard of everything in the sense that is what you're guiding, like the highest, most important thing in your life that dictates ultimately the decisions you make. That is your God.
Your golden calf.
In essence. Yeah. And so Are people going to do that with AI? For sure. People do that with nature. Like, we must serve and bow to nature at all costs, because if we don't, we are going to be wiped out by ice caps and floods and tidal waves. Like, really, I'm not trying to make fun of people. I'm just like, you can make a god out of anything. Your career, your car, your family, frankly. And not that it's bad to serve your family, but that's what's, I think, so interesting, about, I think the Christian methodology there is like, it is truly outside of you, and then there's sacrifice and all this kind of stuff. But, yeah, I just, so are people going to, I think, run towards, not in mass, but you will have an audience that runs towards creating their own personal idols.
Okay.
Maybe just a mirrored digital version of themselves that they can talk to. I don't know.
2 spoof movies now. One I wanted to pitch at you. The other one you made me think. So the AI version of Dogma would be hilarious. Like, replace Catholicism with like AI religion, and that could be hilarious, right? I don't know what the Buddy Jesus would look like if it's like the Chat GPT guy giving a thumbs up. Buddy Altman. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Buddy Altman is going to be on the hero image for this episode. I guarantee you. ChatGPT and I are going to have fun with that. But the other one, the one that I have thought of that I actually really would like to make is, are you familiar with Clockwork Orange?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Twisted movie.
The Gen Z. What'd you say?
I said twisted movie.
Oh, hell yes it is. Most of Kubrick's stuff is. But Gen Z slang for people who overly use AI is sloppers, and their slang for robots is clankers. I want to make a clankers work orange set in a dystopian robotic future.
Clanker and a slopper. I have not heard either of those. And what did they mean? Do they mean by... Is that someone who just uses ChatGPT a lot, or what?
Yes, my daughter's friend called me that a year ago. We think that these kids aren't using the AI that much, right? But only for about the past 3 months has major media used the term AI slop nonstop and said that AI is creating all this slop. Maybe 6 months, right? Over a year ago, a 14-year-old called me a slopper and told me that was the Gen Z term for people who nonstop use LLMs.
Well, yeah, it is funny that someone that age is going to say something like that, because it's like, wait till you get a job or whatever it is you do. You start a business, like have fun avoiding it. See how far you get. Maybe if you're skydiving and teaching that, I don't know. Even if you're a chef, you're going to be using it.
Yeah. So that brings up another amazing topic. I think this is my passion one. Like, Saturdays, I talk to educators about AI because I just had an interview this morning with a guy in India. He came here, got his master's in computer science at Columbia, worked for a bank, doing some tech stuff, and then went back to India and started a startup. But I asked him, like, what's it like in K through 12 education as far as AI is concerned? Their kids are just like Chinese kids. They're into robots. His 4-year-old is building robots with robotic. There's actually a conference for robots and Legos, and his daughter is like into computer science and robotics. And I'm like, man, what I see from our youth is that they're more consumers than they are creators. Asian kids seem to be more creators with technology than consumers, and American kids seem to be more consumers than creators. And AI offers us a way out of that to turn our kids back into creators. And yet a lot of K through 12 schools, all they're worried about is whether or not somebody's going to cheat on writing an essay by having ChatGPT write it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the education system is a whole another interesting topic. I think I told you when we first met, like we started homeschooling again this year because I was like, I just don't see. I think we're really going to do a disservice to our kids if we can do it. So there's that, but we're going to do a disservice if we don't do that, because I'm like, I just don't feel like they're getting set up for any success. I mean, to be fair, the education system has been jacked up for a while, like probably the last 100 years, because it was designed for factory workers. But the how and what you introduce your kids to foster a different way of thinking. Man, there's so many interesting things they can make that are just not used much today. Like my kids were learning like weaving today. You know,
That's cool.
you may think like, yeah, like what? Weaving, and there's like just all sorts of stuff that they can get into, but just to exercise those different parts of the brain, and then healthily introduce tools and AI. Like I found one for vibe coding video games. I'm like, this guy could get my kids behind, because they've played enough Minecraft. They don't play a ton of games, but Minecraft they have, and they have these like stories. I'm like, turn that story into a video game. That'd be amazing. You know, they're asking about like, what kind of job would I could do? I'm like, oh, you know, I'll walk people's dogs. I'm like, that's cool if you want to walk some dogs, but there's other things I could show you where you could launch a game, and I'll help you with that in like a month, and let's see what happens. You could launch it to the whole world. That's a crazy thing to think about.
Bravo to you for that. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Alpha School model that Texas is putting on now, but it actually resonates with your basket weaving. So it's $50,000 a year, so it's real expensive. They haven't figured out how to scale it yet, right? But it comes from a lady who was in education, and her kids, by the time they're in 4th or 5th grade, stopped being excited about going to school. And this was large language models, and she opened this school. And so all the instructors there, they're not called teachers, they're called like coaches or instructors, or they're paid like $100,000 a year, and they're more like Tony Robbins type fire kids up mentors, right? They spend 2 hours doing Pomodoro style writing that's tailored to them on a large language model a day, and they're hitting the upper 99th percentile on the SATs. Now, statistics, I mean, if these kids are paying $50,000 a year, they're probably coming from fairly good stock, and they're probably had, you know, so they were probably reading by the time they were 7 months old, but still, like, they're learning, they're digesting what they need to learn to make the K through 12 system happy, and the rest of the day is like doing an ikigai, basket weaving, cooking, rock climbing. Like, it's all around interactive human activities to foster growth and innovation and imagination. And I'm like, that is gold.
Yeah, well, that's, you know, I'll speaking for myself, I didn't realize in some ways what kind of impact it was having on my kids that I was an artist until they started getting a little bit older. So probably like 3rd, 4th grade, because it was just like, that's just me. You know, I have my things I nerd out on creatively, and then they would see me do it, and they're like, I want to do it. And so they learned how to use hot glue guns and all that kind of stuff really young, and just making random stuff. Like, it's so funny how often they'll make a new diorama, like these insane dioramas, or like a model house with Costco boxes that they've like carefully cut and constructed into stuff. But it's just the way, like, what way are any of us getting trained to think? And even, you know, explaining to them early on what social media was.
Yeah.
If you don't have an adult explain to you what that is, because you see everyone use it, right? They may even see us use it a little bit. But if they don't know what that is, fundamentally, that it's just data culling, it's not really there to necessarily meaningfully enrich your life. And it's, yes, to connect with people, but there's a lot more data behind the scenes, right? We know this. But as long as they know that, they know, hey, if you use it, this is what's happening behind the scenes, versus getting sucked into that world at a young age, which is like the fear of any parent, I feel like, at this point.
I couldn't agree with you more. You remember the cartoon? I don't know how old you are. You're a little younger than me, I think. But I don't know if you remember the cartoon that like explained how a bill became a bill and went to Congress, like the Schoolhouse Rock cartoon, right?
Yeah. I remember that.
if you were to explain what a large language model is to kindergartners using that type, from the time they were that young, using that type of like cartoon imagery and fun, then I think they would be much less likely to have an AI girlfriend when they're 12 years old, because they foundationally know this is a predictive algorithm. It's not a girlfriend.
Yeah, and even if it makes you feel a certain way, that's not necessarily real.
Yes.
You know, I mean, goodness, we could go into, you know, what you teach kids about how to handle emotions too. But I mean, it's a lot of this too, Jason, we know goes back to just like parents being involved in the kid's life, right? And not just totally offloading it to the teaching system and a computer. Like if that's all the mentorship they have, that's not going to set them up for success in most situations. Like they have to, like, yeah. Anyways.
No, I don't disagree. And I keep telling myself I'm going to stop saying this on video because eventually someone's going to get really mad at me for it. But if you look at the character AI cases where kids have died by suicide, like because like the one kid in California or Florida that was like 14 and fell in love with the Daenerys Targaryen bot, and I heard an interview with his mom and she's like, well, yeah, he was becoming less social and he was always on, and I'm like, is it really character AI's fault? Because that bot never said take your own life. Like, this is a tragic incident. I would never say that death by suicide of a child is not horrific, right? But my question is, like, that large language model was not that smart. It didn't pick up on what the kid was saying as indications that he was planning on taking his own life, because he never directly said it. He said, I want to join you, Danny. I can't wait to be with you. And the bot was like, yeah, same thing, reiterating that. So the algorithm didn't figure out what he was doing, right? So is there is the company somewhat to blame and they need to fix that shit real quick? Yes. But who's really to blame? The parents that were in the house that weren't paying attention to how much time their kid was spending talking to his telephone. End of the day, I honestly feel that way.
That's a great point. I never got really deep into the nuance of what happened there. So I'm glad I was always curious, actually. I'm like, did this thing really go, say something that pointed? Or was it just this things being implied and misunderstood all at the same time? But I mean, yeah, it does. It is a little bit baffling that you wouldn't know that your kid's doing that. But I don't know. I guess my parents didn't know everything for sure. Yeah, and this goes back to if you're in an industry building chatbots, being in alliance with other people building chatbots and the safety around chatbots, there should be a thing. So, and having, safety first principles about it. That's been, God, where did I read this the other day? I think it was maybe an article or a post, but basically saying how these language models are getting pushed out so fast that nearly every provider, not all of them, but a lot of them, big ones, have just disbanded their safety programs because they're like, we don't have time to fiddle with the safety aspects of this. We need to get the model out there because it's so dang fierce and changing day by day. Yeah.
Well, and that gets into the regulation thing too, right? So I am a huge constitutionalist. I believe in states' rights. This is kind of a big issue, and we would be much better off with federal regulations, because if you go state by state with regulations around technology, you're really just hurting the startups. The startup that can't hire 50 individual lawyers to cover each individual state. Google can hire as many as they want. OpenAI can hire as many as they want off the money they're not making but raising, right? But a startup can't do that. But the federal government is not coming out with regulations. I'm sorry, Sachs, I'm sorry, Trump, but not doing anything is worse than actually putting together some kind of a federal regulation that we can all get behind, so that you don't have a reason for states to have to go out on their own and create their own regulations nonstop.
It'll change all that really quickly the second something really bad happens.
I know, and that's what everybody says. It's going to take a catastrophe.
Is AI is the culprit. That's exactly, because that's just how, and these things can be, contrived too. So unfortunately, for whatever reason of getting more control, but I don't know how much more control they want. They got the Patriot Act.
Hey, before I let you go, do you feel like things have shifted a little bit in 2026? What do you think's coming this year? Do you feel like the tsunami's kind of broke and things are gonna? Because I'm in the Midwest, right, and I see that small to medium-sized businesses in Ohio, yes, and Indiana, no. They're like they still have the Luddite type mentality. I don't even know if it's Luddite. It's more of like, there's nothing to be seen over there. Like that AI shit, it'll pass. This is like web 3.0. It's crypto. It's going to go away soon, and like I don't believe that's going to be the case at all. And I think this is going to be the year that all changes. I think Claude Code and the new Claude, they have some version of Claude Code that's for like non-coders now. That I just when I go in Claude and build skills,
it's pretty interesting.
Is it? Tell me about it. I hear it's a phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, so Cowork.
Yes, that's it.
Actually, I have it up here. I'm looking at it. Okay. Transparently, I have actually done a lot of the things it can do already, either with a combination of Claude Code or just in chat, and chat's using Claude Code. So it's okay, let me backtrack. I used it for organizing my computer, so that was helpful. But I have done a lot of the things that it already does natively, and I can say that that's amazing. I think what it's done is put an easy button on that.
Yeah.
And so if you didn't know how in chat to call certain tools or whatever the case may be, that's where this is in particular helpful, because really it's just, it's the preset templates for walking you through what it's going to do versus knowing to enter plan mode, make whatever kind of special formatted requests you want. So the prompting's kind of going on in the background. That's interesting to me. That'll bring it more, make Claude Code as a utility more
accessible,
accessible. Yeah, it's a better way of putting it. But I think you were kind of saying with Claude Code just in general, like that the coding aspect is bananas to me, because I've spent all day in anti-gravity and Claude Code in anti-gravity, which anti-gravity is the new Google tool, right? And then some other tech stack pieces, doing some gnarly stuff, having it make directory websites for me. So like programmatic SEO. And it's helping me, and I'm having it help me create the product requirements doc, find the sources for data. I'm building databases. One of the databases I built, it was like 1 million rows already of like legit data. And then I'm already creating derivative data off that to populate this website. It's just like hanging out with a senior dev all day.
It's insane, isn't it? And the fact that I can take a guy like me who, if you would have said that exactly what you just told me 2 years ago, even when ChatGPT was just brand new, I wouldn't have understood a word you said, right? And yet it starts to level that playing field. That's where I think that the co-work is really kind of a big deal, because hell, I'm in front of high school kids all the time, and I know way more about prompt engineering and context engineering and large language. Like, if you're not actively exploring these tools, most people don't understand how to use them yet. So when you have a button that can democratize that or make that easy to do, you're going to get a lot more mass adoption of these tools, I think.
No, you're totally right. And I think it's just where... So Crossing the Chasm, that book, you ever heard of it?
I've heard of it, yes.
Yeah. So for those listening who don't know what it is, it's basically talks about like I think it's five stages. It's not 12 sequences. But I think it's five stages of market adoption of a product, right? So the first like two. Do you have video on your podcast?
I do.
Okay, so can I share my screen?
I think you can. Yeah.
Yeah, six. No, it is 5. So here.
Yeah. Early adopters.
Let's share this because I think this will help people kind of understand what I'm talking about here. We are still.
Well, yeah, it works.
I would say
I've never done this before. Visionaries, yeah.
Visionaries, right? So visionaries within organizations, and this is the mind-boggling thing in many ways. I'd say probably the first.
That's 2017 to 2022, right? That's from the attention is all you need paper until the release of ChatGPT is that early green area. Those guys that were working on this stuff that the rest of us had no idea what the hell they were doing.
Right now, I would argue that we're maybe kind of right here in the chasm in that you have big companies kind of trying to champion, how do they implement AI? Like I have a friend that works at GoDaddy and they have AI, but it's like so guardrailed. It's kind of ridiculous. But still, it's not the vast majority of companies. And I don't mean buying like some software you already own has just like Jimmy rigged some AI onto it, or maybe it's like good AI, but you know what I'm saying? That's not anywhere in here. I'm talking about like the sort of more practical everyday use case, and that it's actually made you more productive. It's actually helped with whatever you're doing versus made you do more work, but didn't really have an impact. So that's kind of stupid. Everyone you just described to, they're this super long tail or maybe over here to some degree, right? This takes a long, long time. But anyways, my point being, because we are still early on, somewhere around the chasm zone, the really gnarly impact of it, I don't think it's hit yet. And so when that does, it's I think it's going to change things in ways that you and I are going to go whoa, but hopefully that's kind of the thing we're preparing for.
Do you think that's
and taking advantage of right now? And frankly, if you can build right now. And this is what you were alluding to, because 2 years ago, you're like, I wouldn't have known any of those terms. Now you do. And if you are someone who loves ideation and you're a self-starter and you can like go and work with these tools, you are in a unique window in time that I don't, and this isn't just me saying this, other people have, but I don't think it's going to happen again. Because once it goes into mass market, doesn't matter, If everyone knows about the gold rush and goes to do the gold rush, it's a lot harder to find the nuggets of gold.
I don't disagree. I think the thing that we've missed, obviously the tech community and anyone who has any kind of computer science background, we're the first adopters of this. This is why code is like the ultimate AI tool, because it's software developers are the ones that developed it, right? And there's like historically the product manager and the software engineer like don't click together, because the software engineer sees this great thing and the product manager's like, that's never going to resonate with people, or you're leaving this out, right? So what I think has been left out of this conversation outside of the tech industry is data architecture, data analytics, data governance. Like if you don't learn the basics of that, if you don't get your data right, you will never be able to scale agentic AI successfully.
That's a good point. Well, I would agree. That's at the crux of it. It's funny because, like, I don't know, 8 years of my career or whatever, we're really at data companies. Like fundamentally, we're mass, one of them was Zoom Info and then another real estate data company. But that was always a topic, right? It's like, what's the quality of the data? Where are we getting the data from? How do we clean it? How can we create a reliable derivative data set? If you make a derivative junk, it's worse junk. It's like, uh,
Now, how do we semantically layer it so that a large language model can read it? Because that's completely different than the way a machine learning model wants to read it.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, but these are interesting problems to be in, because I think I think it's actually going to take somewhat of outsider perspectives to maybe make some of these derivative LLMs, right?
Yeah, you're going to have to.
Specialty LLMs. You're going to get the person who's been around the, technical aspects, the engineering aspects of the automotive industry for 30 to 40 years. Doesn't know anything about computers, or it isn't in that engineering side. Being able to inform what's going to make a good LLM. Where are we going to get this information? How do we ingest it? So anyways,
as somebody who tomorrow is reporting back to my boss in a 30-person healthcare company who asked me a month ago what it would take for us to become an AI like native company, and I'm going to have to say, look, Snowflake is $60,000 to $150,000, and that's not even including the ETL. Google Cloud is probably a good bet, but they want you to pay for Landscape or something like their ETL tool that they want $60,000. Microsoft is where we are, and we can try to use Fabric, which is just a rebranded version of something else they had in the cloud, and it's the user experience sucks in Microsoft, and I'm not sure it ever won't. Like, there isn't really a good answer for small businesses right now, because I think that your cloud, your neo cloud, your like AI enabled cloud environment is going to be the foundation of AI businesses, the same way that your email foundation has been the foundation of businesses for the last 15 years.
So you're saying play that back one more time, just so I make sure I got all of it.
So I think that you're going to have to your business is going to have to be grounded in the neo cloud type environment that you have, particularly if you're in a regulated industry. Let me just frame it this way, right? Like if you take like a Snowflake or a Databricks, okay? So now all your data is warehoused or it's in a data lake. They're trying to use LLMs to mine it in real time, all this unstructured data, restructure it for the LLM use case. But my understanding is that's only about 50% effective right now. It will get more effective. Okay. But let's just say healthcare, okay? This is what made me think about it. I'll run this by you, and then I'll let you go, I swear, if you need to. But I was in an agentic workflow conversation, a global conversation on LinkedIn, webinar about agents in healthcare. And I started thinking about this, all right? If you have an agent doing something in healthcare that is powered by a foundation model, okay, you're screwed, because if they change the parameters, if they change the system card, it will act differently. Okay, so you could say, okay, well, then we'll just contract with a smaller model. Okay, but if that agent has MCP, any of the tools that it calls, if they have foundation models or LLMs powering any of their decisions, you have another part of the decision tree that could change at any minute. So your only real choice is to have a cloud environment that's basically your protected sandbox, where you can create digital twins of your data to test these things, and you bring the GPUs into your cloud instead of sending your data out to the GPUs to process things.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about being, in essence, more self-reliant, right? Yeah. Well, and there's an interesting parallel there with just on-prem to cloud transition in general, right? When AWS has an issue, or any other services, like how much of the internet freaks out? Like a lot. Have you ever seen the? One more weird question, but because I do got to wrap it up. But have you ever read the series 1 Second After?
No.
Okay. Go read that, or listen to it on Audible. It basically, there's 1 second after, and then I think there's like 4 other ones, 1 month after, 1 year later, that kind of thing. but it's 1 second after an EMP goes off. What happens? And the guy who wrote it, William Forsyth, I think I said his name right, does a really good job at playing all this out. But because sometimes when I was going through all those books and we talk about all this stuff, and you go, none of it would really matter if it just stopped working. I was like,
Yeah.
we would be back to like sticks and stones pretty quick.
Yeah.
But no, I followed everything you were saying there. It took me a little bit, but yeah. To what degree are companies actually wanting to like take control of their own destiny more, or is everything just outsourced and well, it is what it is?
Yeah, that's kind of, I guess essentially what I'm saying is our cloud storage spaces have to become what on-prem used to be. So to where we are doing everything inside of our secure cloud space rather than sending everything out of our, we're bringing everything to our data instead of sending our data out to third party, especially predictive models, agentic models, like, because once it's out there, again, like if it's using an MCP and reliant on other models that are predictive models, then how the hell could you ever know what it's going to do or not do? That's not okay in finance. It's not okay in healthcare.
Yeah. Yeah, no, less reliance on just third-party systems is probably the best benefit of, especially those kind of intricate systems. But I gotta wrap it up. But you gotta sign off. Sign off. You want to do?
I always have a sign off. It's my favorite question. And I know you'll be able to answer this one. If one sci-fi movie had it right, 5-10 years from now, what's the world going to look like?
Oh, iRobot is the closest thing to me for that. Not the cars. I think cars get botched in like every movie. The robot thing seems pretty. I think that will come in like maybe 20 years, 10, 20 years.
Okay.
So someone puts a back door into them.
I think Blade Runner. 100%. It's not a horrible future. It's not a great future, but I think Blade Runner. I think we have synthetics moving about. They're not like everything and everywhere, but they're a menace in some way. Maybe they're not trying to kill us, but some way they're a menace. And I think that mega corporations take over governments and run the world. We devalue the dollar and have a huge black market, and black markets never trade in good things. I totally see Blade Runner. Unfortunately, I hope we pass through that into Star Trek.
The bonus one would be the one with guy. Is it Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes?
Yes, Demolition Man.
Yeah, for sure. Or maybe Idiocracy.
Don't get me going on that one. Yeah. I can see that too.
I think we actually already lived part of that.
I do too. I just think that the people that I think that the political people that blame rednecks and the Trump world for causing that are actually totally wrong. That it's over reliance on social programs that causes that level of.
Oh yeah, that right. Where it's like Wall-E based.
Yeah.
Anyways, super good chatting with you, Jason.
Appreciate you too. I wasn't sure we were going to make it to 2 hours. Now we're pushing past it. I will let you go. Enjoy the Phoenix heat. It's about 13 degrees here in Indiana. So thank you so much for your time, Preston. I'll make sure I put all your links to your website and your LinkedIn in the show notes. And we'll have to do this again sometime. Have a great night.